This is Dan Dix here, reporting for Press for Truth, and as you can tell by the title of this video, folks, we need to talk about the Sinclair script for stations video. Now, if you have not seen this, I'm going to go ahead and play it so that we have proper context into what I'm going to be talking about today. But if you have seen this video, it's only less than a minute, 2 minutes, about a minute and a half, so just go ahead and skip ahead right now in the video you're watching now by about a minute and a half if you've already seen this. But for those of you who haven't, for context, we're going to go ahead and play that right now.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about troubling, irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false news
has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 So as you can see, very powerful representation of the manipulation that is at play here when it comes to the mainstream media. And they leave this off by saying this is very dangerous for our democracy. So as a quick side note, I want to include in the description below my video titled The Democracy Deception, which explains why you shouldn't be voting for any of these candidates. And before you jump down my throat for making a statement like that, please watch this video. Again, a link will be located in the description below. And then let me know your thoughts on it after watching the video. Now, back to this Sinclair video. I think if we want to have an understanding of what we're seeing here and how this is all playing out and why, we need to go back to the beginning where a lot of this started. The blueprint is Edward Bernays' Propaganda. This is a book that was written in 1928, which really outlines how this can be done, how it can be achieved. Of course, Edward Bernays is speaking from the perspective that this is necessary for society. And again, he wrote this in 1928, and I want to read to you today from Propaganda because it's incredibly important in order to understand how they are organizing chaos, as he says right here in chapter 1. So Propaganda begins out like this. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and the opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. Our invisible governors are, in many cases, unaware of the identity of their fellow members in the inner cabinet. They govern us by their qualities of natural leadership, their ability to supply needed ideas, and by their key position in the social structure. Whatever attitude one chooses to take towards this condition, it remains a fact that in almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons, a trifling fraction of our 120 million, who understand the mental processes and the social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires, which control the public mind, who harnessed old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. And that's what this comes down to. And I would strongly recommend you to read this book. It's not long at all. It's really kind of like a short pamphlet, really. You could read it in just a few hours. But it's really important in order to understand how they do this. In fact, Bernays points out how it can be done, this propaganda technique used for marketing purposes. And I want to read to you briefly from his chapter called The Psychology of Public Relations, where he lays out precisely how this can be done, for example, for marketing products. But again, this applies to politics as well. It was one of the doctrines of the reaction psychology that a certain stimulus, often repeated, would create a habit, or that the mere reiteration of an idea would create a conviction. Suppose the old type of salesmanship acting for a meat packer was seeking to increase the sale of bacon. It would reiterate innumerable times in full-page advertisements, "Eat more bacon. Eat bacon because it is cheap, because it is good, because it gives you reserve energy." The newer salesmanship, understanding the group structure of society and the principles of mass psychology, would first ask, well, who is it that influences the eating habits of the public? The answer obviously is the physicians. So the new salesman will then suggest to physicians to say publicly that it is wholesome to eat bacon. He knows as a mathematical certainty that large numbers of persons will follow the advice of their doctors because he understands the psychological relation of dependence of men upon their physicians. The old-fashioned propagandist, using almost exclusively the appeal of the printed word, tried to persuade the individual reader to buy a definite article immediately. This approach is exemplified in a type of advertisement which used to be considered ideal from the point of view of directness and effectiveness. You, perhaps with a finger pointing at the reader, buy O'Leary's rubber heels now. The advertiser sought by means of reiteration and emphasis directed upon the individual to break down or penetrate sales resistance. Although the appeal was aimed at 50 million persons, it was aimed at each one as an individual. The new salesmanship has found it possible by dealing with men in the mass through their group formations to set up psychological and emotional currents which will work for him. Instead of assaulting sales resistance by direct attack, he is interested in removing sales resistance. He creates circumstances which will swing emotional currents so as to make for purchaser demand. If, for instance, I want to sell pianos, it's not sufficient to blanket the country with a direct appeal, such as, you, buy a Mozart piano now. It is cheap, the best artists use it, it will last for years. The claims may all be true, but they are in direct conflict with the claims of other piano manufacturers, and in indirect competition with the claims of a radio or a motor car, each competing for the consumer's dollar. What are the true reasons why the purchaser is planning to spend his money on a new car instead of a new piano? Is it because he has decided that he wants the commodity called locomotion more than he wants the commodity called music? Not altogether. He buys a car because it is at that moment the group custom to buy cars. The modern propagandist therefore sets to work to create circumstances which will modify that custom. He appeals perhaps to the home instinct, which is fundamental. He will endeavor to develop public acceptance of the idea of a music room in the home. This he may do, for example, by organizing an exhibition of period music rooms designed by well-known decorators who themselves exert an influence on the buying groups. He enhances the effectiveness and the prestige of these rooms by putting in them rare and valuable tapestries. Then, in order to create dramatic interest in the exhibit, he stages an event or a ceremony. To this ceremony, key people, persons of known to influence the buying habits of the public, such as a famous violinist, a popular artist, and a society leader, are invited. These key persons affect other groups, lifting the idea of the music room to a place in the public consciousness which it did not have before. The juxtaposition of these leaders and the idea which they are dramatizing are then projected to the wider public through various publicity channels. Meanwhile, influential architects have been persuaded to make the music room an integral architectural part of their plans, with perhaps a especially charming little niche in one corner for the piano. Less influential architects will, as a matter of course, imitate what is done by the men whom they consider masters of their profession. They, in turn, will implant the idea of the music room in the mind of the general public. The music room will be accepted because it has been made the thing. And the man or the woman who has a music room, or who's arranged a corner of the parlor as a musical corner, will naturally think of buying a piano. It will come to him as his own idea. Under the old salesmanship, the manufacturer said to the prospective purchaser, "Please buy a piano." The new salesmanship has reversed the process and caused the prospective purchaser to say to the manufacturer, "Please sell me a piano." So this is absolutely brilliant how Bernays has outlined exactly how groupthink works and how that can be manipulated in society in order to get precisely what you want. And that's exactly what we're dealing with today on a massive, massive scale. A lot of you may be familiar with this meme that came out a number of years ago explaining how these 6 companies are in control of virtually everything we see on television. Comcast here is in control of NBC, Universal Pictures, the Weather Channel, the Golf Channel, Universal HD. Walt Disney Company here is in charge of ESPN, the Disney Channel, A&E, Lucasfilms, Walt Disney Pictures, Disney Records, Miramax Films, it goes on and on. News Corp, all the Fox affiliates, National Geographic, the Wall Street Journal, Harper's Collins, 20th Century Fox, and look at Time Warner and Viacom and CBS Corporation, CNN, Cinemax, the Cartoon Network, Turner Classic Movies, Warner Brothers. It goes on and on. Viacom is in control of MTV, Nickelodeon, Paramount Pictures. I think you guys get the picture of how these organizations are able to use Bernays tactics to manipulate society into believing anything that they want them to believe. And I think for a large extent, people are starting to become aware of this manipulation, and that's why they're starting to tune into places like YouTube. They're turning off their TVs in massive numbers. And I do think that has a lot to do with what these guys are really attempting to do here, is to bring that back. They're trying to say here, beware of the fake news that you're getting on the internet. Watch out for, Facebook, for example, manipulating you. Come back to the television set. This is where you need to get your news from. That's what they are trying to say, essentially. They don't want you going to YouTube to get your information. Now, mind you, YouTube is a part of this problem as well. Owned by Google, they are trying to suppress this information. And in fact, a lot of people have noticed this Sinclair video has been trending in the UK, it's trending in Canada, it's starting to trend in Australia. But take a look at the trending list in the United States. They're pretty much keeping this out of Americans' views because they don't want the American people to understand just how much they are being manipulated. It's called programming for a very good reason, ladies and gentlemen, because that's what they're doing. They're programming you, as Bernays said, our habits, our ideas, our very morals to an extent, all come down to a small group of people who are manipulating society into the direction they want it to go. And think about the fact of how this can be used for major events like 9/11, for example. How in just the same day or the day following that event, everyone was being fed the narrative that this was Osama bin Laden. They somehow knew this right away. Or consider the Parkland shooting situation, where, you know, I went to these protests and I was interviewing people, and you get the same answer coming from everybody. Namely, oh, you don't need an AR-15. No civilian needs that kind of firing power. But when you challenge them on this, you say, define assault rifle. Or tell me, what's the difference between a semi-automatic and a fully automatic weapon? They can't define the terms. Yet they're pushing for legislation to deal with something they don't even understand. So what we need to do, folks, is smash our television sets. We need to turn the programming off, you know, before we become so completely manipulated that it will be beyond the point of no return. Now, in regards to this, the Sinclair video, the mainstream media right now are doing their own mental gymnastics, trying to portray this as a partisan issue. Stuff of nightmares. Viral video shows Sinclair forcing local TV anchors to recite Trumpian propaganda. Again, trying to say that what this is about steering you towards Donald Trump, you know, in his views, even though the script itself, here's the script, you know, mentions things like fake stories that are being promoted here, which is why they equate this to being, you know, in favor of promoting Donald Trump. And he even had to chime in on this himself today. He says, so funny to watch fake news networks, among the most dishonest groups of people I have ever dealt with, criticize Sinclair Broadcasting for being biased. Sinclair is far superior to CNN and even more fake NBC, which is a total joke. Now, remember now what Bernays said about these leaders, whether they realize it or not, the sphere of influence that they have in order to control the opinions and the ideas of the masses. And that is a very easily controlled mechanism as well. So again, this is really nothing new. Propaganda was written in 1928. This video just came out, but you know, people who've been watching my channel may realize I was trying to expose people to this fact, looks like almost 5 years ago now, in videos like this one. I'll give you a quick little taste.
Well, if you filled up your gas tank lately, then you don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
It goes on and on. You get the picture. The following year, I put out another one, the beginning of the end for the MSM 2.0, to really try to drive this point home.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness.
It goes on and on, folks. It just goes on and on. It's really, really quite scary. And this is something I've been trying to expose, as you can see, for years now. And I am glad that this Sinclair video came out. It was well edited, it was well done, and it really does a good job at explaining the propaganda that we're dealing with. So again, we need to just smash those TV sets. We need to turn off the propaganda. We need to get away from the programming that is manipulating us into thinking exactly how they want us to think. At Press for Truth, you know, independent media, well, I suppose I can only speak for myself here, but I am a one-man show here. What you see from me is what you get directly from me. I do the research, I do the editing, I do the uploading, I do the promo, I do the marketing. What you get here is what I have to say about these things. I'm not getting the funding and the corporate sponsorship and the kind of backing that the MSM is getting. And that's why I think it's important to support independent media outlets such as Press for Truth, because I'm trying to counter the propaganda. I'm trying to do everything I can to counter the propaganda that they are hitting us so hard with on every single level. And again, as I said, you know, we don't have the backing that the MSM gets. So we really do need the support of you, the viewers, in order to combat this propaganda. And a lot of ways that people can do that is through donating, by contributing PayPal or Bitcoin or the Patreon, or better yet, the Patreon alternative account, where you can sign up for a monthly amount. You know, stop giving your money to Comcast or Bell or Rogers, who are just feeding you this propaganda, as we've shown you, as the Sinclair video points out, as I've tried to show you time and time again over the years what is going on here. It's time we turn the programming off and we tune into some alternative sources of information that are really trying their best to combat this propaganda, which is what I'm trying to do here at Press for Truth. So I'll leave it at that, folks. Again, if you want to support real independent journalism, people who are trying to actually counter this serious propaganda, please check the links in the description to find out how you can support my work and my efforts to combat the likes of the Sinclair group and all the other media outlets that are pumping this stuff down our throat. So thanks for watching, guys. Again, all the links will be located in the description below. This is Dan Dix reporting for Press for Truth.